All right, I'm gonna use this mic because I wander a bit, and so I don't know how much I'll be on the camera, but we'll go with it. So awesome. So anyway, welcome. Welcome to this talk. Appreciate you guys sticking around. And as the intro said, I've been doing security for a while, and I've been mostly blue team. So that informs a lot of the way I think and the way I talk, but I will tell you the interest and what drove me to become part of these conferences and doing talks and going to these and interacting with people was actually listening to people who are on the red team and wanting to understand their side better, because absolutely, you've heard this, red informs blue, and we also have blue informs red. I think it is an absolute synergy that the information flows back and forth to improve our defense overall. And so as part of this journey, I have been really following and understanding, the evolution of security over time. And part of that really comes down to, as I said, blue team, which is all about, in general, how we organize our defense, how we, the organization we do that, which in one sense traditionally operates around the SOC. But you may have heard that, over the last few years, that the SOC is dead. And I'm kind of here to say, well, yes, but no. The SOC is not dead. The SOC really is just evolving. It's changing. And it has to. Why does it have to change? Because if you think about where we started all right, so some of you are great enough to remember where we started. Others this is a bit of history you've probably heard over and over again. But nevertheless, we started, here on your left, where we were protecting a network that was built in a castle and moat type of scenario. It was very hard and crunchy on the outside, soft and chewy in the middle. And we just put our defenses, in a firewall, maybe an IDS, out on the outside, and watched everything coming in. But over time, the network matured, our tools improved, or I should say, we added tool capabilities, and we started having, remote capability, remote logins, access to our network, and then we added some tools like you saw the SIMs starting to show up, VPNs starting to show up. IDSs, and kind of matured or grew into IPSs, and this evolution of networking and our networks and tools and defenses continue to change. Where in the late 2010s, the late aughts, the early 2010s, the late aughts, we started, cloud came about, and we started having tools where we had threat intel started showing up. NDRs, UBAs were nascent, and this evolution continued to move on through the the 2010s, where we had moved into mobile, and phones started going from your dumb phones to everyone had smartphones and access to information on our smartphones, shopping, access to all the databases behind there. And we started seeing other additional tools where you had EDRs and SASE started showing up. SOARs came out. Although, to be honest, if you really talk to anyone who's a long-time Unix professional, they're just like, really? I've been doing SOAR for years. But that's, you can argue with them. That's you don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But nevertheless, microservices, and now, before I get into that, I should say now we're into this 2020s and beyond, where we're now pulling in things like zero trust, where our networks are moving into this evolution. OT is now out there. We're now integrating OT with our system. Microservices, XDR, CASB, and I'm drawing a blank on ACM, which is basically attack surface monitoring. Thank you. Attack surface monitoring. So all these tools now are part of our arsenal as defenders. Our networks are far more complex than they ever were. Well, what's the problem? The problem is that our SOCs are still in this basic structure. The structure and the architecture that we set up in the early 2010s. Right? We're pulling in data from all these devices and sending it to some kind of centralized system. It doesn't necessarily have to be a SIM, but for all intents and purposes is acting as a repository for all the data. Maybe we have threat intel, maybe we have a SOAR, but we have this tiered structure of analysts. We have your tier 1 SOCs that are doing the your tier 1 analysts doing your triage, your tier 2 people who are doing the slight deep dive, and then your tier 3 people who are doing the incident response, your reverse engineering, maybe they're threat hunting. And so that is, that's what's going on. That is today's SOC. Today's SOC cannot handle that because it faces certain challenges that our evolution of our network and tools have bring us. What are those challenges? Well, first of all, there's a lack of personnel. Well, I know you guys are shocked that I brought this up. You're managing an increasingly complex stack of things, with increasingly complex data that you're bringing in from all sorts of places. You have limited visibility into an increasing attack surface. This was far easier when we just had a few computers and servers sitting in a building somewhere, and now we're expected to protect everything from everybody from everywhere. That's a whole lot for that SOC architecture, that SOC structure to do. Which brings us to this point where you cannot operate at scale where you're handling better attacks coming at you at higher volumes. You're still fighting this fight. This fight is going to be around forever, where you're trying to balance compliance with best practices, with effective security and operations. That, because things have to work, right? We're still trying to secure things that need to work when the president or the CEO clicks a button, or your vendor or your customer clicks purchase, right? That still needs to happen in a secure way. So you're still fighting that battle. But here's a big one. You have a paradigm shift that some of us, especially some of us older folks, are trying to change how we think, where our attackers are going after identities and data instead of servers, right? Back in the day, they were like, oh, I owned a server, which is, that was a big deal. Now they're like, whatever, maybe I'll own it, maybe I won't. I just need the data, right? That's all I need. So, how did we get to this spot, right? We talked about the changes, we talked about the challenges, but really, how does that kind of come together? Well, a big thing was the shift in operations in the early 2010s that went to DevOps, right? This concept that we don't have to do upgrades and do patches sort of very slowly. So back in those days, many of you remember this, right? When ops and the developers said we're going to come out with a new version, they would build it and then they'd give it over to you. Hopefully, that didn't always happen, but hopefully, and then you spend some time testing it and then send it back. And that worked. If you had an efficient process, that was okay, but it still gave you time to actually kind of interact with the releases. Yeah, that doesn't happen when they're releasing 5 to 8 to 10 releases a day per product. So this DevOps thing made it really hard for the way security traditionally would review things. Now, before I go on, I do want to say that there are a good number of organizations that are very, very good at DevSecOps, and that have figured out how to do this and have their security built into the DevOps cycle extremely well. I don't want to gloss over that. But many of us are still trying to figure out how to keep up, and we have various stages of various levels of success for this. So, again, I'm going to reference the fact that we have moved to a mobile, anytime, anywhere, anytime, any place access expectation, especially over the last 3-4 years of COVID, right? Or 3 or 4 centuries, depending on how you feel after being home by yourself all that time. So there is that challenge. One good piece of news is that security has gotten better. Right? So who here remembers the slammer worm? please, just don't let me feel like the oldest person in the room, okay? I'm already the oldest person in my job, and that's really depressing. All right. So the slammer worm, for those of you who don't know, was a SQL worm that just was automated, just like, and when it came out in the early 2000s, just killed networks. I was at Thule Air Base, and this is back when Thule had like a single pipe that was like a T1, and that is less bandwidth than most of you have ever even thought of. But we thought it was great at 1 point something meg. We were like, woo, man, living large. I don't know what I'm going to do with 1 point something meg coming over my pipe. May watch a video in 5 hours, but darn it, I'm happy. At any rate, and I remember they were like, oh, this is killing us. Just shut down Thule Air Base in Greenland. It's like, we're working. But yeah, that was bad. You know the slammer worm's still out there? Go sniff port 1433, right? 1433? Yeah, it's still out there. Do any of you care? No, we're like, whatever. But you know what? So security's gotten better. But guess what? So have the attackers. So we're you know, it's a leapfrog thing, right? Security tools and methodologies have increased in number and complexity. And above all, we are no longer operating under the assumption that our networks are unhackable. For the, you know, some of you may not remember this, but Larry Ellison, head of Oracle, came out and said, oh, we're totally unhackable. That lasted less than a week, I think. It was, yeah, things you do not want to say in public. Or really, anywhere. So, what is the solution? Hint, it's in the title. Yeah, become next gen, right? Well, that sounds great. Good buzzword. Can we put some handles on that? Yes, let's put some handles on it. What does that mean? What is a next gen SOC? Well, I've tried to break it down into some really strategic things that you can measure, right? So the first thing is shift your strategy. Shift from becoming defense in depth, and I heard someone say expense in depth. I like that analogy, it is. But I will tell you, zero trust is not less, but that's a different talk. But it's true, you got to figure this out. Move to a zero trust model, move to resilience in your network. Have a SOC and processes that handle routine attacks and alerts automatically. Get your analysts out of doing clickety-clickety, pointy-clickety things and get them into thinky-thinky things, right? That's what you really want your analysts to do. You're paying not for their finger, but you're paying for the gray matter in between their head. So leverage that. Alerts are enriched in triage. I don't know where I get triage from. I guarantee you I'm going to say that again at least once more. Detections and automated responses are continually being built and tuned. You are moving some of the DevOps things, concepts into the SOC on a constant improvement basis, continually and frequent. You are ingesting logs and events from all over the place. I will tell you, my feeling on this has evolved over time. At one point I was like, minimize the things that you're ingesting. Then I was like, ingest all the things. And then I went back to reduce the amount of things you're ingesting. But I think to take advantage of the analytic capabilities that we have now and are coming out, you are going to have to ingest more information than ever. And I get that. We'll talk. I get the expense and the challenge of that. We'll talk about that and some solutions to that. Utilize ML and AI and threat intelligence as well as atomic alerts. And just to level set, atomic alerts are things that you know are bad. If I see this, that's bad, send me an alert. Very, very straightforward is what I mean by atomic alert. So, how did we get there? Well, the way I broke this down is I broke it down, and I'll slow down a little bit, but because I want to go through these steps. I broke it down into 3 phases with multiple steps on each phase. And the whole purpose of this is not to say that everyone needs to do everything. This is not a one size all you can eat, here's your plate, consume it all type of endeavor. It is a choose your own adventure. So pick what is appropriate and applicable for your organization. If it's really large with lots of resources, well, you know, consume it all. If it's smaller with, you know, very limited, very restricted resources, then you figure out what is best for your organization that you can do well, outsource what you can, and then find ways to mitigate the challenges from the rest. The point of all of this that I'm giving you, and additionally, you don't have to do this in the order I prescribe. I'm just trying to break it down in a way that's easily digestible so that you can regurgitate it later. The point is, I think all of these steps are the things that are needed to happen for a good SOC to become, in that sense, next gen. So let's jump in. First, if I haven't said this enough, I will say it more. Increase your automation and your integration. So Cisco's security outcomes study, I believe number 3, the last one that came out a couple of years ago. Great report, by the way, all 3 of them. If you haven't read them, go find them. They're great reads to understanding the tools and processes that make SOCs effective. And they are surprisingly not very Cisco-based, okay? Wendy Nather and Wolf, I cannot pronounce his last name. Awesome authors, among other people from Cisco who put this out. So, go read those reports. One of the things they say is that the better tools integrate, the more effective automation you will be able to perform. So this is really important because the better you have your processes and your steps automated, the more effective your SOC is. If you ever get a chance, read some of the things that Palo Alto's SOC is doing. They are very highly automated, and they are consuming, responding, and analyzing millions of events like per hour. It's like insane, and it's really good what they are doing. So, ingest threat intelligence. And I'm going to say, I'll refer to this later, ingest applicable threat intelligence. I can't tell you, it still bugs me to this day. We had a customer, I was integrating their threat intel into their SIM product, and they're a US-based worldwide pharmaceutical company, and one of their threat feeds was about attackers against Australian education systems. And I said, why do you have this? You are a US-based pharmaceutical. And they said, well, you never know when that group might pivot. Okay then. You wear the tinfoil hat at night too, I bet. So, yeah. All right, let's go. Plan migration to cloud-based SOC tools. You are not going to be able to handle the amount of data and the amount of storage and the amount of analytical compute that you are going to need on your on-prem systems. Not at scale. And that is absolutely going to be a fact. And I get it, it's hard. You invest, your company's invested a lot in on-prem stuff. But at some point, you're going to start to have to make hard choices about what you bring in. In fact, if you're not doing this already, you're going to be making hard choices about what you bring in and what you analyze, especially as ML and AI become more and more required to do the kind of analysis that you're going to need to do. So, start planning how to move that to the cloud. Create and refine metrics that define your tasks. Get an asset management and inventory system. Figure out what you have. And it's not just assets, right? Because I wrote this and then I was thinking when I was going over this, but I didn't bother to change it. It's also who is in your system, what your identities are, and where your data is. I mentioned before that your attackers are going after identities and data. Well, you should know what identities you have and what data you have in your system. Yes, that's hard, but raise your hand if you thought this was an easy gig. So yeah, it's a challenge. I don't know how to do it. We have tools. You can buy tools. You can write tools. You can buy and write tools. But I will tell you, even if 60% knowledge of what you have is better than 0%. So don't let perfect get in the way of good. So What else? Oh yeah, speaking of which, plan and begin a shift to monitoring and protecting your data and identity. Now notice also the difference that is in this picture here for phase one versus what I had before. We are now looking at a cloud-based SIM. We have brought in threat intel, we have added SOAR, and most importantly, we have started to change the structure of our SOC, where instead of, we have kind of tiers, but we're kind of moving that tiers into groups, more so where that lower group is handling more than just triage. They're doing threat hunting, they're doing detection analysis, they are doing, what else did I say they're doing? I can't read my writing. Threat intel. So they are doing a lot of different things, and then that third tier is still doing IR, but eventually you're going to see they're going to start doing engineering. So phase two, and just to continue that thought, that upper group is now your detection engineers, and so they are creating and writing detections, use cases, playbooks, and updating those things. And your lower group is broken more into, instead of tiers, although it's still labeled tier 1, tier 2, they're going to be migrating or evolving into groups where each group is self-contained, doing all the things. Now, each person in the group may have a specialty, but that group as a whole, maybe it's 2 people, maybe it's 5 people, but they're doing all of everything from triage to threat hunt to analytic stuff. Just to continue with the diagram before I get to some of the points, which we'll probably cover some of these things. When you're bringing in fact, one of the first ones is you're going to implement a technology to filter and route logs. Because now what you're going to do is you're going to figure out among your logs, among your data sources, what data is really key for atomic alerts or very simple machine learning, right? That data you're going to send to your SIM or your XDR or your EDR. That's the data you're going to send there. The other data that's like, I don't know what's good, it takes a whole lot of compute to figure out what's bad in this, you're going to send to something else, like a data lake, something that's cheap storage that your analytical capability can leverage to do deep learning. You are going to, so also you're going to look at saying, you're going to really start migrating to cloud from that, at this point, because now you're ingesting a lot more data. You're opening up the fire hose coming from your source in there. You're putting in AI and, well, I'm going to say machine learning. I'll get to AI in a minute. You're going to start using machine learning to analyze those large log sets. You are using threat intel to enhance your data to figure out what's going on. You're using UBA, that's user entity behavior analytics, or RBA, which is risk-based analysis, which I love. And no, Mr. X Splunk, that is not just a Splunk term. Other SIMs have it. Sumo Logic has that capability, as well as other SIMs have that. But you use risk-based analysis to help figure out what is bad in the mass amount of data that you are collecting. You start really being focused on security. Start really focusing your security on identity, on data. Right. At some point, you should have implemented things like IDAM and multi-factor authentication, and you start using that data along with restricted analysis to the different parts of your data as you start doing zero trust to be able to really identify malicious behavior or suspicious behavior in your identities and data access. You continue to use metrics to evaluate tool effectiveness and your progress in these things. So, last phase was where you, one thing I failed to mention, excuse me. One thing I failed to mention is that this is not an overnight thing. This is not a tool or switch or a 9-month project. This is 5-10 years, okay? So there's a lot here, And it is designed, the thought process is designed to be accomplished over time, over, as I said, 5 to 10 years, if not longer. And of course, the challenge is, that there could be additional things that you might figure out along the way that you have to do. However, this is not something that you should rush through either, because each of these is a deliberate step and a deliberate, not only change in process, but it's a change in mindset, and it's a change in your organizational structure, and that takes time to do well and efficiently. So, phase three, you have completed your migration to cloud, because now you are ingesting all the things, and you're hoovering it all up. But you also are now sending that into a log storage capability. You're not really putting it into a SIM. Because what you've done is you separated, this is where I see the industry going in 10 years, 7 to 10 years. You're going to have to separate your log storage from your analytic capability, or at least be able to. Vendors will still want to sell you everything in one package because that's what vendors want to do. But the concept is that your analytic capability is going to have all the specialties, from the atomic alerts to the AI, to the UBA, to the RBA, to the ML, all of it built in, and there's going to be so much of that you're going to want to have, and all of that is going to access a log storage location where all your logs are going to be, whether it's structured and or unstructured, that capability of saying, hey, I'm going to analyze this. And maybe even, I'm just projecting here, this is a total guess, maybe you're able to purchase multiple log analytic capabilities from different vendors, each of whom specialize in a different type of analytic ability. The point being is that by doing this, you're able to pick the best of breed to analyze what you want. And then you have an automation component that is able to reach into either the results that your analytic tier is doing, or reach back into your devices, into your instances to perform actions and activities that enhance or protect or monitor what's going on. Your SOC structure has completely migrated to the teams and the detection engineer concept, where your security engineers are totally that's what they're doing. They're just constantly updating the alerts, constantly updating the automation based on interaction between themselves and your analysts. And then, and I always have at the bottom, you probably noticed that I have the ticketing, because I think the help desk will always be a component that you're going to need to help capture, monitor, track, and respond, interact with the users or the customers for individual activities. So some of the points here: developing the SecOps group. You've developed that. You've organized your teams into tiers. One important thing is, as I mentioned, this is not a one-size-fits-all. So you are the recommendation is to partner with an MSP or an MDR to cover gaps where you can't do that. Another thought is that some of these activities may not be, if you're a small organization or a smaller organization or perhaps even a larger one, you don't necessarily have to do all the time. Maybe you don't need a full-time individual to do detection engineering, right? They don't need to do this updating all the time. So maybe you hire somebody to come in, you outsource someone to come in once a month, and they come in and update rules for a week, and then they go away for a month, and then come back for a month. I know our company has been hired to do that, and I'm 100% sure, 150% sure other companies, other service vendors have been hired to do the same thing. So that's an option if you don't need that 24/7. You can outsource the threat hunting. You can outsource the threat intel. So those are ways to accomplish this capability without having that full-time person on staff. Develop, fund, and implement a comprehensive training program internally. I will foot stomp on this because you know, as I mentioned earlier, you know, we're struggling to bring people in. We're struggling with the lack of personnel. But one way to do that is to train in-house. It accomplishes one thing immediately. It helps with retention. So retain the people that you have by training them up into doing the things you need them to do. But it also attracts people. It makes your company more attractive. You can say, hey, we've got a great in-house training program. Now, that in-house training program doesn't necessarily mean that you have a trainer, but it means that you have ways to get people up to speed and to train them for the skills they need, whether it's sending them to training, if you have the budget for it, sending them to conferences, or allowing them and to go and spend time learning on their own, having a lab internally. It's we are running a AWS lab that's nearly automated. It spins up machines and people can get in and just do things and learn how to do things. It costs us less than $200 a month to run this for 30 people. Okay, this is, you know, absolutely within the budget of nearly every company out there. And ours is not that complex. So AI. So when I wrote this initially, there was no such thing as ChatGPT. And then ChatGPT came out, and basically everyone and their brother is like, well, AI is going to solve the entire world crisis, cure cancer, and just about everything else. It's impossible. I mean, I've read science fiction my whole life, so so it's in the realm of possibility, at least the realm of imagination. I think, in essence, there are a lot of people trying to figure out how it can help defenders. It's definitely been helping, in some ways, attackers. But I think we haven't figured out the best way yet. So I don't know. I spent some time trying to figure out how it would be used in this scenario. And I think the way I see it now is that it will be, that I see it evolving effectively, is helping people know what to do next. And providing recommendations based on the data that it collects to say, oh, I see that this event happened on the endpoint, this event happened in your IDAM, and this event happened over here. Based on this, you know, you should go check these places or monitor this type of activity. I think that is probably a legit use that you will see near term become better and better. I see eventually that it will be able to maybe take some automated simple actions by making calculated risks on responses that it will say, based on the analysis of your environment and what you do, what your organization does, I will take this automated response because that is a 0.2% risk of stopping your, blowing up your organization. So I can see it doing that in the midterm. And then in the long term, I can see it sort of working in a side-by-side kind of environment where you're familiar. I mean, you remember when we worked in offices and we would have a problem and we just sit in a big circle and throw out ideas and everyone bounces off each other and eventually we figure something out. I can see AI becoming that kind of interactive kind of voice-activated thing. So, who knows? But that's kind of where I see it going. And that, helping with analysis and investigative assistance. So, how do we get there? Start with what you have. I mean, don't get overwhelmed with like, oh, I gotta, get all the things and put all these things in, or grab many of them as can. But start with what you have. Increase the use of managed services to cover gaps. It's okay to use a managed service to do something now and then bring it in-house later. That's fine. That happens a lot. Those of you who do professional services know that. You get hired because the company can't do X, and eventually they can do X, and the contract ends, and that's good. That's a successful engagement. Simplify the number of tools where possible. Just I think that Cisco's outcome study said that an organization has an average of 63 tools. That's a lot of tools. That is a lot to really, for any group to know. I mean, if you have 20 people, you got to maintain and upgrade and check all, that's a lot. Increase the ability of those tools that you have to integrate with each other, right? Sometimes that may mean getting rid of a tool because you just can't get it to talk to anything else. And that's painful, I get it. It's hard to get rid of tools that have been integrated. And there's politics involved, so, but look at ways of doing that. Hire, develop these skills. These are the skills that we're gonna need in the SOC going forward. I mean, including the skills you have now, but add people with these skills that have these skills or develop the skills yourself. Formalize the SecOps process, continue to re-engineer procedures to leverage new tools, right? How many times have people gotten a tool and then not realize that the procedures that are in the SOP apply to the old tool? Right, and so you have someone come in, they're reading the SOP, and they're like, I don't get it, the tool doesn't do this, and you're like, oh, that's right, that was for, such and such, which, went out of business 10 years ago or something. So update those. So, in conclusion, again, no two SOCs will look alike, right? They should all have the same goals, but they will not look alike at the end. Implement automation efforts, continue your automation efforts. Absolutely, I keep pounding that. That's going to help us. It's not going to get rid of people. It's going to make your people better. Remember, get them out of pointy clicky, get them into thinky thinky. Consume tailored threat intel, shift your operations to the cloud. Start protecting identity and data. Really start really thinking about that. Increase your telemetry that you ingest. You're going to need more data to do ML and AI effectively. So you can develop ML and AI. Plan for CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development, protection engineering, and ultimately use short and long-term planning to pursue zero trust and network and security resilience. So, absolutely, we have got to start moving out of this model of SOC that we have. It is holding us back from being able to meet and secure the environments that our organizations are going to. So with that, here are my contacts. I am way more active on Mastodon than I am on Twitter, so if you want to reach me, that's where you go. And I haven't written anything on that blog in like 3 years, so. But it's there. Awesome. So, questions? Yes?
Where can we get these slides?
I will put the slides out probably on that. Actually, I do have a page on there called presentations that I tend to update because I do presentations. So that's where to go. Awesome. Yes?
So how often do you go back and think about the CIS critical security controls and the SOC and the next gen?
How often do I go?
Is it still applicable, today?
Yes. How often do I think about the CIS critical controls and the next gen SOC? I don't think specifically in terms of the CSC, but I do think in terms of the regulations that do encompass it. So the NIST 853, the DoD STIGs, and other things. And I think they are still applicable. Remember, these get updated, all the time. It's just how we implement them, how we put those into those tools are valid, and that's part of the challenge when you think about just maintaining and protecting. When you think about like CSC1. Knowing, having an asset management inventory, right? Well, that becomes asset management, data management, identity management, and having all of that known, right? So it's still valid, but it does some changes, into that.
And that was I think the first bullet on your first slide, asset inventory management.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But I use it as a foundation. Mm-hmm. I always say, are we doing the fundamentals, and then I start looking at AI and the new things.
No, I 100% agree. And I'm trying to, a lot of what I like to do is I try to figure out this high concept, give you handles so that you can be very practical so you can do exactly that. So,
tools, just to add to Craig, tools like ML make asset management 100 times easier because you don't have to do abstraction, you don't have to do manual correlation, you don't have to do decision trees, none of that. You teach it the data, you show it what it looks like, and you say these objects and these attributes look together, check, and it just starts running it. Right? This idea of extraction, AI, what generative AI does really well if you want to play with it is the idea of regex to extract data out of something to pass it into another thing like a function call. That's, you don't have to do that anymore. You just have to tell the AI to go do it.
awesome.
And it figures it out.
I think I'm being kicked out. Am I done?
Let's do one more question.
One more question. Yes, in the back.
So on your diagrams, after the first one, the term IR got dropped off. Is that still tier 3 or is that independent from the SOC at that point?
I moved it down into the teams.
Okay.
I didn't. If I didn't label that, I apologize. But thank you for pointing that out. So it moves from the security engineers who are doing the detection updating down to the teams. And as everyone knows, there are definitely times it's all hands on deck anyway. When you have a major incident, it's just like, I don't care what you're doing IR now. So yeah. So with that, I will be out in the hall. If anyone has further questions or discussions, thank you so much for coming to my talk, and have a great conference. Appreciate it.
Also,